Hello, everyone. I'm Neil, and this is Ulrich, and we are broadcasting from the middle of the beautiful Okanagan Highlands in eastern Washington. And some people would say it's the middle of nowhere. We feel it's the middle of everywhere. Today, Ulrich's going to interview me about the concept of how he came up with the 8 Pillars of Contentment. Go ahead, Ulrich.
All right. Well, your the eight pillars are sort of a symbolic of your journey. And so how did you get to here from wherever? Um, I think there's some interesting insights in your story.
Well, the 8 Pillar journey actually started when I was born, but it became more intense as a result of almost dying. I'm a survivor of 3 heart attacks. The first one was May of 1998. There was some damage to my right descending artery, and I needed 3 stents. And I was very scared sitting or lying down alone in cardio rehab, wondering what was going on, 48-year-old having a heart attack. In the subsequent weeks,
Mhm.
I actually learned and read that I could reverse everything with a whole food, plant based diet and a more meditative lifestyle. Did I do it? Oh, for a couple of weeks. And then I slid. Oh, instead of eating a Big Mac, I'd eat a chicken sandwich, thinking chicken was healthier. They fixed me. I can go on with my life.
So that's a good example of how often we have good intentions and we tend to slide back to old behaviors. So, uh, how
Guilty as
did how,
charged.
how did you begin to uh, to overcome that?
Well, this was 1998. That's 20, 26 years ago, approximately. Happened again 14 years later in 2012. I was with some buddies in a restaurant having breakfast on a Friday morning, September 21st, and all of a sudden I had sweats and dizziness, and I turned pale. Fortunately, one of our coffee group was a retired anesthesiologist who I think of very fondly. His name was Fred Hillman. And I asked Fred, "Do I look pale?" He says, "Yes, you do." And I said, "I all of a sudden feel horrible. Do you think we should call 911?" And he said, "Yes, I think that's a good idea." But by that time, I was so weak that he made the call, and they told him to get me lying down on a floor with my head propped up, and if somebody had a regular adult aspirin to chew on it. And they did that, and by the time I was on the floor chewing on the aspirin, the paramedics arrived and said, "You're having a heart attack." And off to the hospital I went. They put a bunch of stents in, also the right descending, and I was not anesthetized, but they gave me a sedative. And as I woke up, my sweet wife, who was working as a harpist at the hospital, was playing music for me, and I realized I wasn't in heaven because she was playing very familiar music, and she's still alive. And I did some more reading and studying, and guess what I found out? That a whole food, plant based diet and a calm lifestyle with exercise and meditation could totally reverse it. Did I do it? Kind of, sort of. I became a vegan, but every time I was out with people, I didn't want to hurt their feelings, and I eat meat and cheese and lots of oil. Um, I weighed about 200 pounds during the time of the heart attack. I was able to get my weight down to about 160, um, but I wasn't good enough because in February of 2022, 10 years after that, I was walking with my wife and I had chest pains, not very serious, but I did go and get it checked out. And they did an EKG and said that you're not having a heart attack, but something's really abnormal here. And they sent me to a cardiologist, wonderful man who's been in practice 44 years by the name of Romeo Pavlik in Chewelah, Washington. And he said, yes, you need some tests to see what's going on. I can tell there's anomalies in your EKGs. So off to a nuclear scan, and they found out that I had actual damage, physical damage to my left ventricle and 42% ejection fraction, which normal is about 55. And Dr. Pavlik said that you probably experienced what we call a silent heart attack. Wasn't a lights out 911 emergency. You had been exercising and you probably grew collateral arteries and you felt the squeeziness in those collaterals. And he did encourage me. He said, well, you can live with this for about 20 years. And I doubled down, became a better vegan, lost another 10 pounds. But then I encountered some wonderful experiences and people that showed up in my life, um, about last August and September. And I want to acknowledge them. One is Dr. Gabor Mate, who wrote a couple very influential books. The one that was very influenced is sitting behind Ulrich, called The Myth of Normal, back there. Dr. Michael Clapper, who I started taking his master class on holistic health. Even though I wasn't a doctor, it was extremely interesting and gave me the hope that I can still totally reverse this in a couple of years. And then I found Rochester Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Ted Barnett and his wife Carol had a wonderful immersion program that I did back to back. Actually, Ulrich joined me in January. And I've done much better since then. I feel now I have hope that I can reverse this. But I asked the question. Ulrich, do you want to ask me the question? Why it took you so long?
Why did it take you so long? And after the first and the second, what now is the thing that's sort of pushed you over to most likely following through and making yourself healthier?
Besides the inspiration of those people and friends like Ulrich and my wife, who loves me very much, I came to the conclusion that there are multiple reasons why I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. Ulrich, do you do anything sometimes that you're not supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so you sort of took this big thing and broke it down into 8 parts that
Okay.
probably is what's helping you. So
Are you talking about those 8 parts?
the 8 pillars of contentment, and being probably the overall being content is a big part of health in general. So we could talk about any of the points on your chart, but let's start with mind. How does mind play out in your attempt to be healthier, and in the sense of also finding a meaning in your life that maybe wasn't there before?
Well, mine gave me the ability to process the information. Mine gave me the ability, and put this down a minute, to recognize that there is a way out, but it wasn't everything.
Mhm.
And obviously there's a mind-body connection, but it wasn't until I explored the emotion that I recognized that there were other things in play.
Yeah,
And
we can know the right path, the right steps, but most often something keeps us from applying what we know. And so that's what you're talking about, is that you found other elements in your life that are allowing you to tease out the important things that are more than just mind.
correct. And I recognized, particularly after reading The Myth of Normal and watching some wonderful lectures by Dr. Mate that are available on YouTube. One is actually titled The Myth of Normal. There are several of them. That I, the reasons for not doing what I was supposed to be doing originated when I was very, very young, in my formative years. As a matter of fact, I can attest that I was and I am addicted to food. I'm a eataholic. I eat like I'm going to the electric chair tomorrow, and I still suffer from that. Let's see. This is me at my first birthday. And notice the above photo that shows a big white cake on the tray of my high chair. And that's how my mother and grandmothers and many of the people in my life showed their love. I have a little bit of frustration in my face. I don't recall this, by the way, because I didn't speak English. I spoke baby. But ingrained in there, according to Dr. Mate, there's the memory of that. And I must have been a little frustrated because it was a vanilla cake and not a chocolate cake, because chocolate cake was my favorite. And I don't want to get into all the details, but the food addiction overrode common sense. And, I've later learned that I can satisfy that food addiction with foods that won't kill me, like um, lettuce and greens. I can eat them every day, and I've learned to really enjoy them, and other very, very nutritious foods.
So in a sense, instead of struggling to stop the whole thing, you're allowing yourself to still enjoy the food, but to fill it with food that actually heals you.
Correct. Now, I would love to someday reduce that addiction, but I haven't found an AA, for people who eat too much. I have friends who are alcoholics and attend AA meetings. Is very, very effective. Um, I would join one if there was a local chapter of the Foodaholics,
Mhm.
because, and maybe I'll always be a foodaholic and acknowledge that, but my my cravings for all different kinds of foods that were not healthy overrode my common sense. Um, that was another thing at play. So that's how emotion tied into my mind and my body.
Hmm.
Uh, Spirit. I like talking about spirit because we can draw on our spiritual resources when things are going rough in other areas. Um, and I'm not just talking about religious type spirit. I'm talking about anything that we feel awed by that's bigger than us.
Yeah.
Ulrich,
It's
when's the first time you
it,
felt a sense of awe?
the first time I saw a sense of awe. Oh God. I think it was around the same age as you. Uh, my parents went to visit some friends in Munich. They were sort of on the outskirts, and there was a brewery and a bakery across the street. And I managed to waddle over, open the gate, and cross the road, which happened again later in my life. I'm sort of an adventurous soul in that sense. And so nowadays, and I went over to the bakery, and they were really nice to me. They actually gave me some bread to eat, and then try to figure out where I came from. Of course, by that time the parents were there. Anyway, uh, so anytime I smell bread, and anytime I smell yeast from brewing, that memory pops up. Now, fortunately, uh, it hasn't led in the same direction as the food issue for you. And thank God I didn't become an alcoholic with beer. But those are the kind of memories that can create a template for years and years and years into your life. So,
That's great. Our next interviewee is both a professor and a religious leader, and we're going to talk a lot about spirit when that comes up. Um, of course, there's meaning in life, and the title of our podcast is "A Voice of Meaning." How does that tie in? Do you think, Ulrich?
well, I mean, you can have positive meaning and you can also have negative meaning. So it's not just a one kind of meaning, but especially at an older age, when you sort of contemplate, well, where have I been? Why am I here? Where I'm at the present time? Is there still meaning in my life, or do I just sort of sit back and wait for the end? Uh, Finding meaning is a constant struggle in everyone's lives, and that's what we're trying to bring to consciousness, to get people to think. And so we're going to have a lot of different interviews with people that are doing interesting things, that have interesting insights. And if you if you like this, make sure you click the like down below. We need those to continue, and subscribe. We also need the subscriptions to be able to continue, because uh, we have lots of people to interview and talk with, have conversations with. Um, the world is full of 8 billion stories, and we'll bring some of those stories to you.
Well, thank you for that, Ulrich. The next pillar is social connections. And one of our motivations of starting this podcast is both Ulrich and I live in the middle of nowhere, and we love to talk with people about ideas, share stories,
Yeah.
and
That's how we met.
yeah, that's exactly how we met.
At our local brewery.
Yes, yeah, that's our local community center. But we would like to develop a community of meaning and contentment seekers who communicate with each other, and you can do that by putting comments below in the video. And again, if you subscribe, then you'll get a notification if somebody else makes a comment, and we can start some dialogue here. Because my wife once asked me, well, who are you the expert on all this? You've got so many flaws and so many problems. And I feel that, why not?
Yeah.
And
None of us have the bead on what's right or wrong. We have some understanding because of years, but there are younger people too that are very, very wise in the sense that they're aware of what's going on around them and how that affects them. So um, we encourage people to interact with us, uh, tell, have a chance to tell a part of your story and how that brought you to a meaningful place in your life.
the next pillar is financial. If we're broke, we have less agency, we have less freedom to do what we want to do. And it's important.
Yeah.
However, it's one of the eight, and it's not the most important.
Yeah.
I, I've
Well,
Go ahead.
Maslow has his pyramid of for the actualized human being, and survival basically means food and air and safety, but it also means having a purpose which is above that, because when you're trying to figure out where your next meal is coming from, or are you going to be able to pay for the rent, those things, you're not thinking very very much about the higher levels of meaning in life. It's so um, that's part of that eight pillars. It all works together. There's no one that's over the others, or there isn't any more important. So I think that's why I like the eight pillars that you came up with.
And then finally, we have the environment. And there are two environments: the environment that on the outside where we live, there are tens of millions of people now suffering from bad air because of fires in Canada. And if some of you are listening or watching, I feel for you. We in Eastern Washington encounter that more often than we would like. But there's also the internal environment. Talking about awe, I found out that there are about 90 trillion microbes inside of us working for our benefit in any given moment in our microbiome. There's 200 varieties, 200 different species of living organisms that aren't human that help us survive. That's our internal environment, and then also our mind environment and our emotional environment. So that's the inner environment, and then there's the outer environment where we live. Do we like where we live? These are very, very important things. So I'm going to put this up again. And we're scratching the surface.
Yeah.
If you would like me to email you a PDF, all you have to do is send an email to thevoiceofmeaning@gmail.com. I will put that email address in the notes and say I'd like my PDF copy. If you subscribe, you might want to hit the little bell, and then you'll find out when we have both podcasts and musical numbers to share. And also, please make some comments. We really appreciate those of you who have commented before. That connectivity part is very, very important. And over the weeks and months and years to come, we're going to more drill down on these pillars of contentment. And of course, the reason why there's a line between one and every other one is it's all connected. There's 28 connections in these 8 pillars. And I believe that if something's going wrong in one or more of those pillars, it's hard to feel contentment. I also personally believe that a lot of problems in the world are as a result of discontentment. And if there are more contented people, we might live in a nicer place. And it might help with some of the many, many problems that we're facing in this age. Ulrich, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you've nicely summed up not only the vision of the entire series, but also your comments today. Thank you.
Again, you're welcome. And again, our next interview will be with Solomon Makola. He's halfway around the world from us. He's a very, very interesting fellow. I've known him personally since 2011. Stay tuned, and it's nice to be here.
We'll see you again.